Hi, this tutorial is going to get you started with using a color sensor. So you can see I've got a test brick here. I've got color sensors plugged into numbers. I picked port 1. You can pick whatever. Remember, motors get plugged into the letters. And here you can see I have this plugged into the computer as well. I want to show you how to see the values that the color sensor is feeding to the brick so that you can use those when programming. So if we step over from the second tab over to the next tab, you'll see port view is the option I have. And I select port view, and that will show me what's plugged into my robot. Since I only have one thing plugged in, it's showing me that value right there, and you can see the value change from 0 up to 60, 50, depending on how close I am to the paper, the white paper. I get a higher number. As I move over something darker, the number drops. So when I'm about the same distance over the dark color, I get about 10 or 15. And when I'm over a bright color, depending on the distance I am away, I get upwards of 90, 80 to 100. So you can use those values to help you program your robot. I wanted to show you one other thing, and that's how can you access those same values on your programming environment. So if I click over here on my port view window, I can see I have my sensor plugged in, and I get those same values. There's that 90 to 100, and you see it matches what's showing up on the screen up here, right down here. And when I go over to the dark areas, I get the 12 or 15. That's real important for knowing how to program. So let's talk about how do you use the light sensor values to program. So what we're going to do is just take a regular motor block, and instead of telling it to be on for just one rotation, we're going to switch that and just tell it to be on. Now we need to tell it for how long it's going to be on, otherwise this program is not even a second long. So here what we're going to use is what's called a wait block. So we bring up the wait block. By default, the wait block has us waiting for 1 second, but we can change that to any of our other sensors or values. So if we come up here to color sensor, and we want to select the reflected light intensity to show how much light's being reflected back in, it changes our brick and gives us some values that we can change. The 4 here just indicates the fourth option, which is less than. You can use greater than, equal to, all of those different Boolean characters. Okay, so we're going to leave it as option 4, which is less than. And then it has what's called a threshold value. By default, it makes it 50. That's the value that it's going to trigger and change from this block and move on to the next block. And so it's going to keep the motors on until this condition is true. So if it is, my brick is looking at the white table, I'm going to have values down here that are in the 80s and 90s. Again, depending on how far away my color sensor is mounted from the surface. But then as soon as my color sensor sees something dark, it drops down to about 10. So my threshold value could be set a bit lower than that. I could make my threshold value be 30, since I know I'm not going to drop down to that low until I get over a black line. But anything else, a different shade of gray or something like that, like when I'm over this other colored area, I get things down in the 70s, but that's still not going to trigger once it's at 30. So once it's done that, it's going to go ahead and trigger and move on to the next thing. So then what I want to do is switch and grab another motor block, and this time make that motor block just be a stop block, so I can use the off to do that. So this program here is a basic light sensor program that will go until it sees a line, a dark line in this case, and then stop. So think about what you would do if you were driving on a dark colored surface and wanted it to stop when it saw a light line, light colored line. What things up here would you need to change in order to make it react to a light line instead of a dark line?